Okay, the Guardian had a newsletter that came out, and I wanted to talk to you about it. I actually disagree with some of the stuff they had, but I thought y'all might be interested in this. And it was talking about here, it said that forget Panama, it's easier to hide your money in the U.S. than almost anywhere. I mean, this was what the whole article was talking about. Now, one thing I would tell you ahead of time is I don't advise anybody to be hiding money. If you're making it, you're better off declaring it. If you don't like the tax laws where you're at, you're better off relinquishing your U.S. citizenship if you're a U.S. citizen, or if you're from a high tax country that taxes worldwide income on its residents, like Canada, Australia, you're better off breaking those tax ties, moving out, and getting away from the tax ties legally. And then you can live in a place like St. Kitts and Nevis that has no income tax, no capital gains tax, no estate tax, no inheritance tax, and that's the best way to do it. Now, the article was talking about here, and this was in The Guardian, it was talking about, forgetting Panama, it's easier to hide your money in the U.S. than almost anywhere. The term tax haven may evoke images of exotic localities, and it went on to say that but Panama actually ranks as the 13th most attractive spot for hiding assets, while the U.S. lies third place. Now, also, folks, if you want to legally get your income taxes to zero, how to get a second passport as quick as 45 days, do three things. Hit the subscribe button on the right of your screen right here, and you get new videos automatically as they come out. And don't forget hitting the notification bell next to it. And number two is I would like to hear from you. If you got a question or comment, just put it below. And number three is go to our website, www.citizenshipquickly.com, and just ask for some help. Now, one of the surprises about the Panama Papers, I'm sure you heard about that, the largest leak from an offshore tax advisor in history, is how few Americans have so far been exposed. And the reason it may be because creating a shell company in the U.S. is easier than obtaining a library card. Now, I will tell you this, that setting up a bank account in the U.S. is one of the easiest places in the world to set up a bank account. I've done them all over the world, and I'll tell you something, it's by far the easiest. The EU has gotten to be incredibly complicated, but the U.S. seems to want everybody else to come out with these real strict money laundering laws, but they don't seem to be doing it themselves. But the anomaly may be because it's so easy to create a vehicle to hide your money and your identity in the U.S. that there's no need to mess with Panama, according to Suruti Shah, Vice President of Programs and Operations at Transparency International. It's an anti-corruption organization. Now, he went on to say that you don't have to go to Panama or other tax havens. They are not the only ones making it possible for corrupt officials and other criminals to launder their money. He went on to say that you can do it in every state of the U.S., and Delaware is so synonymous with anonymous companies that it was named as one of the most symbolic cases of corruption. Now, he went on to say that in every state in the U.S., you can incorporate an LLC, a limited liability company, or another legal entity, and you don't have to disclose who the beneficiary on it is. In fact, Delaware is so synonymous with anonymous companies and ghost corporations that it was named in Transparency International's Unmask the Corporation campaign as one of the most symbolic cases of corruption. Now, the term tax haven usually evokes an image of some faraway place like Belize or the Cayman Islands, but yet in 2015, in a ranking of tax havens most attractive for those looking to hide assets, the U.S. came in third. Can you believe that? Surpassing the Cayman Islands and Singapore. Now, the two places that were actually even better suited as tax havens for the rich were Singapore and Hong Kong. They were at the very top, according to the Tax Justice Network that publishes the ranking. Now, what was Panama's ranking? Well, it was 10 spots behind the U.S. at number 13. Now, where does the money flowing offshore come from? Now, the information is hard to discover because real owners usually hide behind nominees, people who, with no real control and no assets in the company, who simply just, lend their signature. A small sample of about 13,000 owners from all over the world, recently compiled by Mossack Fonseca, gives some indication. Now, China and Russia top on the list. Now, they went on to say that a while back, Shaw sent her husband to return an overdue a book that she had borrowed from the library. When he returned the book, he told her library he told her library card was expired, and that to renew it, she would have to bring in her driver's license showing her current address or utility bill with her address. Now, if I were to open a shell company, she was talking about here, I wouldn't require any of these things. I would actually need a less information to open a shell company in the U.S. than I would need for a driver's license or a library card that she pointed out here. Now, this is so true. It's so easy to set up bank accounts in the U.S., and the restrictions are just not there. In this and every other state, just some like, for instance, Delaware, where the majority of U.S. companies are incorporated, no state in the U.S. requires beneficial ownership information. So it's practically everywhere, explained Shaw, that who lives in Virginia. Now, some states are either easier than others. It just depends on the state. Now, in some states, it's more money than others because they are also have more tax-friendly laws. For instance, Delaware and Nevada and Wyoming are famous, however you look at it, for their tax laws. Now, Texas and Florida are equally easy. There is nothing illegal about setting up a shell company. U.S. states are proud of their business-friendly policies. Delaware, for instance, prides itself on being the incorporation capital of the United States. More than a million business entities have made Delaware their legal home. They've claimed the state's Division of Corporation website. More than 50% of all publicly traded companies, listen to this, more than 50% of all publicly traded companies in the U.S., including 64% of the Fortune 500, have chosen Delaware as their legal home. Now, in the wake of the Panama Papers, the number of shell companies incorporated in the U.S. could grow. Instead of stashing their cash in Belize, Panama, or the Cayman Islands, the companies and individuals could turn to the U.S. Now, they certainly could, said Heather Lowe, Director of Government Affairs at Global Financial Integrity, given the lack of action to the U.S. to address this issue compared to, say, European Union, who may like a safe bet right now. The European Union has got to be very strict on this, but the shell companies have their uses. They can be used to buy land anonymously, for example, without tipping off the competition, to create an entity to protect future business rights, or holding a company for various purposes. They can also be used to legally make political contributions anonymously. Just because some people or companies have chosen to state the form shell companies and hide their assets doesn't mean that the entire system should be to blame, argued Charles Ellison, director of the John Weinberg Center for Corporate Governance at the University of Delaware. Now, Delaware really is not a tax haven. Delaware is a place where most U.S. companies are incorporated because of the very intelligent corporate law regime that he was talking about here. Now, obviously, some companies that are problematic come here but that's not the design of the system. That's a collateral effect. In some, one uses the corporation for nefarious purposes. I don't think that's the fault of the corporate statute. That's the fault of the individual himself. Now, shell companies, whether created abroad or at home, make it easy for people to hide assets and commit crimes, to Shaw. Now, for example, in the mid-2000s, former Louisiana Congressman William Jefferson had created 8 different shell companies to hide hundreds of thousands of dollars of bribes. Victor Bout, a famous arms trafficker known as the Merchant of Death, had at least a dozen shell companies incorporated in Delaware, Texas, and Florida to cover up by his weapons and trafficking operation. Now, there isn't a reason, said Shaw, why creating such a shell company should be easier than obtaining a library card. Her group, Transparency International, has called on the U.S. Congress to pass the Incorporation Transparency and Law Enforcement Act, introduced by Congressman Carolyn Maloney and Senator Sheldon Whitehouse. If enacted, the bill would require states to collect, maintain, and update information about beneficial ownership of all companies created in the U.S. Now, bipartisan legislation has been introduced in the House since 2008, but it's never been the light of day. It's never been enacted into law. Now, Elson remains skeptical as to whether such a law will actually work. I don't know how fixing the beneficial ownership rule would fix this. If someone is devious enough to game the system in this way, they would work their way around any sort of single regulatory change. These are very clever people. They talked about here now, in order for any legislation to pass, the U.S. community would have to come out in support of it. Now, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce has long opposed legislation to end anonymous companies, and they must reverse that position and begin to support honest and open business practices. Now, I will tell you this, that if you think you're going to be able to hide assets in the U.S., that's not going to happen. You might be able to get more confidentiality going through a Nevada or a Wyoming corporation or even Delaware. But I'm going to tell you, folks, if you're in the U.S. and you're trying to hide money, you're going to make a bad mistake. You shouldn't be doing it to begin with, but if you do it, you're picking a bad place to do it, because the IRS uses ways of wiretaps. They can look at your emails. There's all kinds of ways they can subpoena records. And I can tell you this, if you get a judgment, they can track the assets down. If you want good asset protection, you're going to have to keep the money outside the country where you're living. You might be able to keep it confidential as far as your corporate structure is, but I'm going to tell you, there's always a paper trail to your money. Even if you keep it outside the country, there can be a paper trail to that, but you're not under the jurisdiction of the United States. Anyway, folks, or any other law that or a country from where you're from, it doesn't have to be the U.S. If you want to learn more on this, go to our website, www.citizenshipquickly.com. Hit the top bar that says Apply With Us. Fill out those questions. And then, folks, don't forget to hit the subscribe button, the right of your screen right here, and you get new videos automatically as they come out. And I would like to hear from you. If you got a question or comment, put it below, and I look forward to talking to you on the next video. Take care.